Welcome back. Iran has admitted it shot down the Ukrainian passenger plane, saying the accident was caused by human error. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky says we insist on full admission of guilt. Iran's armed forces say the aircraft was flying close to a sensitive military site and brought down unintentionally. President Hassan Rouhani said Iran deeply regrets the accidental shooting down of the airliner. He said investigations continue to identify and prosecute this great tragedy and unforgivable mistake. Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said a human error at the time of crisis caused by U.S. adventurism led to the disaster. Expressing his condolences, Zarif said Tehran apologizes to Iranian people, to families of all victims and other affected nations. The U.S. Treasury Department has imposed more sanctions on Iran in retaliation for its missile attack on U.S. forces in Iraq this week. It also promised to further tighten the screws on the Iranian economy if Tehran continues to engage in what it describes as terrorist acts. The targets of the sanctions included senior officials and manufacturing, mining, and textile sectors. The sanctions were announced by U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin in an appearance at the White House alongside U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
We are announcing additional sanctions against the Iranian regime as a result of the attack on U.S. and allied troops. First, the President is issuing an executive order authorizing the imposition of additional sanctions against any individual owning, operating, trading with, or assisting sectors of the Iranian economy, including construction, manufacturing, textiles, and mining. And let me be clear, these will be both primary and secondary sanctions.
EU foreign ministers have backed away from any immediate response to Iran's decision to intensify its enrichment of uranium. In a meeting, the bloc repeated their call for Tehran to respect the limits of a 2015 nuclear arms control accord. The officials did not consider a dispute resolution process that can lead to renewed UN sanctions on Iran. EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell said the region cannot afford another war and called for an urgent de-escalation. Borrell said EU wants to calm tensions by reaffirming the bloc's commitment to preserve the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action.
We regret that the United States decided to withdraw unilaterally from this agreement. And we do whatever we can. Instead, it's one of the tools that we are building in order to allow a continuous economic transaction with Iraq. That's true that until now it hasn't worked, not yet.
World leaders have actively started easing tensions in the Middle East. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has embarked on a 5-day trip to the Mideast as Tokyo seeks to help stabilize the region.
Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said Abe will go to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Oman for talks with their leaders. During the trip, Abe will brief leaders of the three countries on the deployment of Japanese self-defense forces to the Middle East. Earlier, 2 Japanese patrol planes left Okinawa for the Middle East as Tokyo's first long-term intelligence gathering mission abroad. Meanwhile, German Chancellor Angela Merkel is also arriving in Moscow today to hold talks with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin said both the leaders will discuss global issues, including the escalation in the Middle East and the situation in Syria and Libya. The Kremlin said talks will also include resolving conflict in Ukraine based on agreements reached on the Normandy summit in December.
Now from the U.S., which has accused the Russian Navy of aggressive actions in the Arabian Sea after one of its ships came dangerously close to a U.S. Navy destroyer. In a statement, the U.S. Navy said the Russian ship ignored collision warning blasts from the USS Farragut. It said the Russian vessel initially refused but ultimately turned away, narrowly averting a collision. The Russian Defense Ministry has denied the allegation, saying it was the U.S. destroyer that blatantly violated international rules. Going back to the Middle East, in Iraq, thousands of protesters rallied across the country, reviving a month-long protest movement against the government. They also chanted slogans against the recent US and Iranian intervention in their country. With hundreds streaming into the capital's Tahrir Square, Iraqis turned out across the country. In Basra, unknown gunmen opened fire on a car, killing 2 journalists covering the protests. Demonstrators in Karbala clashed with security forces, while many others were arrested in Basra. The anti-government protest had been overshadowed by tensions after the killing of Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad. The UN Security Council has voted to renew cross-border aid to Syria, but halve the program to avoid a Russian veto. The assistance for millions in the war-ravaged country is being extended for 6 months. The resolution was passed by 11 votes in favor and 4 abstentions, which came from Russia, China, the US, and Britain. Under the new resolution, aid will be delivered only through 2 checkpoints on the border with Turkey. Belgium and France expressed disappointment at the reduction of humanitarian aid. US Ambassador Kelly Craft said Russia will be responsible for deaths in Syria because of the lack of assistance. Earlier in December, Russia vetoed a proposal to extend aid for a year from 3 crossings. The leader of Oman, Sultan Qaboos bin Said Al Said, has died after ruling the country for over 4 decades. Hitham bin Tariq Al Said is taking the oath of allegiance as Sultan to succeed his cousin Qaboos. A 3-day period of mourning has been declared in the country. The 79-year-old monarch had ruled the Sultanate since 1970 after deposing his father in a bloodless coup with British support. He transformed Oman into a modern state and was the Arab world's longest reigning leader. Last month, Qaboos returned home after undergoing medical checks and treatment in Belgium. Tunisia's parliament has rejected Prime Minister Habib Jamli's proposed new government in a confidence vote. President Kais Saied has 10 days to select an independent person to build a coalition able to command a majority in parliament. Members of parliament defeated the vote for Jamli's proposed cabinet by 134 votes to 72. Tunisia will hold new elections if the new person cannot form a coalition government within a month. Jamli was nominated by the Ennahda party, which won the October 2019 polls, but failed to secure a majority in parliament. Tunisia has been in a state of turmoil since former dictator Zine al-Abidine Ben Ali's regime was overthrown in 2011. Now going to India. Despite massive protests, the Indian government has issued a notification stating the Citizenship Act has come into effect. The anti-Muslim law caused a strong stir across the country as 27 people died protesting against it. In a notification, the Home Affairs Ministry said under Section 1 of Citizenship Amendment Act 2019, the law has come into force. Under the law, the citizenship will be given to persecuted religious minorities except Muslims. The law presented by Home Affairs Minister Amit Shah was passed by the Parliament on 11th December. 3 major states, West Bengal, Punjab and Kerala, have already refused to implement the controversial act. Meanwhile, thousands of people took to the streets in Hyderabad to protest against the new citizenship law. Similar protests were staged in the cities of Kochi and Kolkata. In India, 20 passengers have died and 21 others were injured after a bus burst into flames in Uttar Pradesh state. Police say the double-decker bus caught fire after a head-on collision with a truck on the highway near the city of Kanauji. It said 46 passengers were on board the bus when the accident happened. Officials say only 10 to 12 passengers escaped the burning bus, while others were unable to escape. Going back to the U.S. now, U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she will submit articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump to Senate next week. Pelosi's letter means the Senate impeachment trial could begin as soon as next week. This ends a prolonged standoff with Republicans over terms of the president's trial. In December last year, the House charged Trump with abuse of power and obstructing Congress. In Taiwan, millions of people are voting to elect a new president in a decision that will shape the island's relationship with China. Tsai Ing-wen is not in favor of closer ties with Beijing, while her main rival Han Kuo-yu promises to ease tensions with China. Running for a second term, Tsai Ing-wen is ahead in the polls. Elections for Taiwan's legislature, where Tsai's party held a majority, are also taking place. 19 million people are registered to vote in the election. Beijing sees Taiwan as a renegade province and says it will one day retake the island by force if necessary. In France, talks to end the country's longest transport strike have failed to make any headway. The government and union leaders have locked horns over a hotly contested pension overhaul. Prime Minister Edouard Philippe had spoken of a commitment to openness about the disputed pension proposals. Philippe says he is willing to negotiate on the pivot age, but that remains the key feature of the draft bill. Trade unions had demanded the reforms be dropped entirely, promising another strike. The overhaul would sweep away the country's 42 separate pension regimes in favor of a single system. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Resuming from Europe, in Georgia's breakaway Abkhazia region, Parliament will hold a session today to discuss the country's political situation. The emergency session comes after the Supreme Court annulled the results of September's presidential election. Opposition leader Aslan Bazania said setting a date for the new election could resolve the current political crisis. Abkhazia Central Election Commission said it will propose a date for a new presidential election within the next 5 days. Abkhazia's crisis blew up on January 9th when protesters stormed President Raul Kajimba's office, demanding his resignation. In Northern Ireland, rival political parties have agreed to a deal to restore the province's power-sharing government in the capital. Belfast, the development follows the government's collapse 3 years ago. The power-sharing deal will help the volatile province handle the pressures of Brexit. At a news conference in Stormont, the Sinn Féin president said it had taken the decision to re-enter the assembly. The Democratic Unionist Party had already responded positively to the proposals. Under the deal, the new executive will also take action to resolve an industrial dispute involving teachers and other measures. The United Nations say incidents of ethnic violence in Congo's Ituri province may constitute crimes against humanity or even genocide. The UN's Human Rights Office said 700 people have been killed during the violence from December 2017 to September 2019. In addition, at least 140 people have been subjected to sexual violence or rape. It said most of the victims belong to the Hama community. According to the UN, nearly 57,000 people have fled the violence to neighboring countries since February last year. In Australia's New South Wales, 3 bushfires have merged to create a massive blaze in the snowy mountains. 233,000 hectares of Green Valley fire merged within the nearby East Orkney Creek blaze, creating a single blaze 3 times larger than any known fire in California. Fires in the region have destroyed over 1,000 homes since the new year. Officials say danger is equally great further south in Victoria, as forecasts are for more heat, strong winds and dry lighting. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people across Australia took part in climate change protests. China has kicked off a dazzling light show in the southwest of Sichuan province to celebrate the Spring Festival. A lantern show has attracted thousands of visitors on the first day. More in this report.
The Diyang Lantern Show is China's traditional event during the Spring Festival. This year, the traditions have been perfectly combined with modern technologies, offering an audio-visual feast to the visitors. A total of 18 themed landscapes and 56 sets of lights and water screen projections are arranged with a sense of fashion.
This year's lantern show is very different from the previous traditional ones. It is so festive and jolly here, bringing back many beautiful childhood memories.
Recreational facilities and delicious snacks were also offered to the visitors. Thousands of people across the country are reuniting in their hometowns to greet the new lunar year.
We hope that through this lantern show, the residents in Dayang can have a happy and prosperous new year. We also hope to bring more joy to everyone visiting the lantern show.
The Lantern Show will run till February 16 as a measure of the local government to boost festival tourism.
Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.